Pitam yena bhutare swayam rupa karamayam darati swaparantikam. Vandeham Sriguru Siyata Parakamanam Srigurun Vaishnavam Scha Sirupam Sagadatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Stam Sadevam Sadvaitam Sabadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sirada Krishna Paran Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishikan Vitam Scha Narayanam Namaskritam Naram Chevanarotimam Devim Sarasatyam Vyasam Tito Jayodhyad Nashta Prayashu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttamashoki Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtahi Nigama Kapaturu Garitam Param Shukam Makaramita Dravisamitam Pibata Bhagatam Rasha Mariam Mahora Hora Sikubhuvikaram Krishna Swadama Pagade Damagani Karo Nashta Dushamasha Paranako Dunodidam Twamapi Adabhishuta Vishutam Bibu Samapi Adana Bidambiduxiram Prakyahidahur Mohanjatadnaram Sanklesha Nirvana Musanti Nanyataha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dino Bandhu Jagat Pate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostute Jayatam Sarito Pangom Hammadar Madar Gati Matsavesha Padam Bojao Radhana Madana Mohano Sriman Rasarasaram Bam Sivri Karsan Benishan Gopinata Sri Esraha Dibyad Brindaranyaka Padrumada Srimad Radnagara Shima Sanishto Sri Sri Radhashila Govinda Prasadabihi Sevimanushmarami Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmanya Taya Cha Jigari Taya Krishnaya Govinaya Namo Namaha Mangalang Bhagavan Vishnu Mangalam Gudarajaja Mangalam Panadikaksho Mangarayatu no Hari Om Narayanaya Vidmahi Vasudevaya Dhimahi Tano Vishnu Prachodhyate Om Mahadevi Chabidnahi Vishnupadni Chidhimahi Tano Lakshmi Prachodhyate Mahalakshmi Namastivyam Namastivyam Sare Sare Hari Priya Namastivyam Namastivyam Tapti Kanchana Gonage Rari Vindavaneshwari Vishavana Sute Devi Pranamani Hari Priya Nama Om Vishnu Panaya Krishna Prasnaya Bhutare Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namaste Sarasati Devi Gurumani Pachari Nipashes Sunyavali Praskada Desara Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sri Gaur Bhakta Vindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare So today we're going to talk about how we can create a complete alternate fictional reality through the deluding process of self-deception. Now, how does it start? What's the seed from which this thorny plant sprouts? Well, none of us are perfect. We all have idiosyncrasies. They're not necessarily flaws, but they're character traits, personality traits, reflections of our own temperaments, which all have a spiritual origin, but as they reflect, as they said, shining through a glass darkly, the clear light, when it shines through a tinted glass, it comes out tinted. So we all have emotions, we all have feelings, we all have individual personalities, and they're pure in the spiritual world. In the pure world, we exist as pure thinking, pure acting, pure doing, living beings. But some or other, and that's a whole nother topic we're not going to get into today, we decided to separate, diverge from the Lord, from the service of the Lord, from a God-centered life. We were attracted by the idea of a self-centered life. Why does he get all the attention? Why does everyone talk about his name? Why does he own everything? Why can't I get some of that for myself? So at that moment, we were no longer compatible with the spiritual world. So Krishna created an alternative reality for us, which is this material world. This whole material world is a reflection of the real world. You make a big mistake if you take this material world as all in all, and you put all your eggs in the basket of this material world. You try for happiness through material arrangements. You try for satisfaction materially. You try to achieve peace and deep, meaningful, lasting relationships in the material world. Forget about it. It's about as fruitful as looking for water in the desert. I put you on notice right here up front this Wednesday morning, Wisdom Wednesday morning, that just as you can never find water in the desert, you might find the appearance of water, but that's just a mirage. There's actually no water there. So this material world offers the appearance of happiness, That's not surprising because it's a reflection of the spiritual world. In the spiritual world, you see behind me the beautiful waterfall, the fountain, the yellow sagebrush, the red plants, the water lilies. This is not the spiritual world, it's the material world. But the spiritual world, it would look the same. It would look the same. The only difference is the fountain, the yellow sagebrush, the water, everything, the clouds above, which we can't see right now, the red would all be eternal. They would not be composed of matter, they would be composed of spirit. So they're all eternal. And it's not surprising then that the perverted reflection of the spiritual world, which you see a sample of behind me, it seems to offer the promise of happiness, but that's all it is. It's just a chimera, a phantasmagoria. We chase after it at our own risk. We sacrifice our own spirituality, our own satisfaction, our own joy by falling for the carrot of happiness within this material world. And don't feel bad. You're not the only one. Even great saints and sages and demigods like Indra and Brahma are susceptible to this flaw of trying to find happiness in a temporary material world, which is in and of itself created of dark, temporary, ignorant matter. So we all have our uniqueness. And because that uniqueness, sometimes we're afraid of being viewed in a negative or condescending way, or afraid of being viewed askance by others. And in order to like ourselves, which is we love Krishna, we're parts of Krishna, so it's normal to have healthy self-esteem because you're parcel of God. God is the most attractive object. So as an emanation from him, each and every one of us are innately attractive, but we're also individual. We're not like each other. We don't always understand each other. We don't always see eye to eye. We have our basis for unity is to know that we're all sons and daughters of the Almighty Lord. We're spiritual brothers and sisters. But when we feel censure, we feel condemnation from society and culture, then we start to lie to ourselves about how good we are. We mentioned yesterday that amongst those who are aware of the characters Duryodhana and Yudhisthira in the Mahabharata, if you ask them, which do you think you're most like? You think you're most like Duryodhana? You think you're most like Yudhisthira? Most people would say, I'm like Yudhisthira. I'm not at all like Duryodhana. That is not true. We are deceiving ourselves that we're good when in fact we're not nearly as good as we think we are. And the reason that we justify our faults and our temper lapses and the lust and anger and greed, which peak out consistently, daily basis, is because we want to like ourselves. But rather than put in the work, rather than put in the time and the trouble to chant the names of the Lord, to read scriptures, to associate with saintly people, it's a culture. It requires time, it requires energy. We've been in this material world for who knows how many hundreds, if not thousands of lifetimes. So to dedicate one lifetime to rectifying our consciousness and preparing ourselves to going back home, back to God, it doesn't seem like much. But we're so predicated on sense gratification, we're so spoiled, we don't want to take aside one lifetime in order to live forever, to reclaim immortality. We want our cake and eat it too. So we don't want to put in the work, we don't want to do the time, but we want to like ourselves. And so we start justifying ourselves. We have a sense of guilt about something we've said or something we've done wrong. And in order to make that sense of guilt go away so we can feel better about ourselves, instead of facing what it was we did and dealing with it, telling ourselves the truth, we start self-justification to make that guilt go away. We gave the story briefly of the husband. The baby was crying in the middle of the night, and the husband's first thought was, I'll get up and take care of the baby, let my wife sleep. She works hard all day long. She's trapped here in the house, and I get to go out. And but then he put that very worthy, noble thought aside And he said, well, I work hard all day too, and I need my sleep, and I've got a big meeting at the office tomorrow. So as soon as he shoved away the noble thought and he failed to act on it, then he put the whole responsibility on his wife. And when she didn't get up to take care of the baby went on crying, and he's continually losing sleep and getting more grouchy. He starts blaming his wife when in fact, if he'd simply gotten up and taken 5 minutes, he would have felt good about himself. His wife would have appreciated him. But now he's blaming his wife. He's starting to think ill of her. I work all day. I make the money. I pay the mortgage. I put food on the table. I have a long commute on the train into the city tomorrow. I have an important meeting that I have to be with my main client that I have to be up for, and she's just lying here taking advantage of me. None of this is true, but he spins all of this out to get rid of the guilt that he feels for not being a good, the best sort of husband and father. So he starts thinking ill of his wife. Then he might say something sharp to her, something insensitive to her, and she reacts. Her day starts out on a negative comment made by her husband, and then she says something cranky back to him. And that just seems to prove to him what he was thinking, that she's lazy, she just hangs out all day, watches TV, does nothing. And then he sends something back to him, and the whole thing gets very messy very, very quickly. So you see how self-deception can ruin relationships, it can ruin a family, it can ruin your marriage, it can ruin your job, it can ruin your connection with your colleagues, with your boss. Self-deception is another word for self-destruction. It would have all never come to pass if he had practiced getting into the pattern of acting on that first instinct, which is the whispering, the prompting of Paramatma, God, Krishna within the heart. Krishna wants us to be the best versions of ourselves. He wants us to have the best relationships with our children, with our spouse, with our parents, with our coworkers. And so he gets in there first with the best advice. But Krishna's not a bully, he's not raucous, he's not loud. Above and beyond all, he respects, he has a hands-off policy so far as our free will is concerned. So he will whisper in a calm, rational, objective tone of voice from within the heart the right course of action. And we need to get into the habit of acting according to that right away. Because if you put it off, it will be shoved aside by the loud, bullying, raucous, insistent shouting of Maya. So what happens when we fall into self-deception? We waste a ton of energy, a ton of thought processes in self-justification, distorting the truth about ourselves and those who are close to us in order to feel good. And we completely miss the opportunity to enjoy life today, to enjoy life in the moment, to live a fulfilled, happy life, pursuing our values and our dreams, because we spend all day long with a chip on our shoulder in false justification, blaming and pushing down others to whom we attribute our bad mood. Self-deception leads only one way, make no mistake about it. It leads to pain, broken relationships, addictions, anger, numbness, a deep ontological angst, which overtakes us in middle age when we realize that more of our life is past than what is up ahead of us, and we have not done anything meaningful, anything purposeful, anything really satisfying in our lives. We've wasted our time in self-deception. We've chosen over and over and again to create a pattern of defending ourselves instead of a pattern of change, even though we know that we've been miserable. And every time we make the wrong decision, we dig a hole of misery even deeper, but we're habituated to, we're patterned to shirk responsibility for our own choices. And in that self-deceptive state of mind. We hurt others and we hurt everyone around us. We're living in an alternative reality, a world which has no connection to what is right. It's simply a world just to get rid of that spot of guilt, which is a way of alerting us to our own problems. It's an alarm call, which we're meant to heed, not to avoid, not to, in the course of avoiding it, distort the way that we see the world and that we interpret or justify our own actions. Bottom line, self-deception is about avoiding the sensitivity or vulnerability of being human. We create an artificial, pretentious, false, self-deceptive image of ourselves, and we pretend to be something we're not. We cover up our flaws, our weaknesses, rather than facing them, because it's easier to lie to ourselves than to stare truth in the face. And we do this for so long that it becomes a pattern that we can't get out of. It becomes reflexive. We stop to even think about self-improvement. We accept ourselves as we are. We accept that we've gone as far as we can in life. We accept that our best days are behind us. There's nothing good in our future. And in this way, we lose sight of everything that we were created to be and everything that we were meant to achieve. We spend our time monopolized, tyrannized by false feelings of anger and resentment, frustration, all of which will spread to those around you, exacerbating the problem. Person who lives deeply in self-deception, when he enters the room, there's a tension that enters the room. Everyone tenses up because they don't know what he's going to say, what he's going to do next. He's unpredictable. He's unsatisfied. He's like a loose cannon on deck. So let's just down here. You can't start with a lie and come to a truthful conclusion. You can't talk ill of others and have a healthy, wholesome life yourself. You can't be negative and have a positive life. You can't talk victim and expect to have victory in your life. All the consequent actions and thoughts which stem from self-justification, communication, coping, expressing your emotions, trying to change others, storming out of the room, storming out of the house, all of these not only do not succeed in making things better, but they usually compound the problem and make things worse. We end up losing sight of others, our spouse, our children, as real human beings with needs. We start seeing them as obstacles to our happiness. And it doesn't matter when we're seeing people this way, it doesn't matter what self-improvement book you've read or self-help book that you've read or what thoughts for remedy are in your head for the moment or for the day or for the week. The problem is all of our interactions are going to be tainted and discolored by our depersonalizing people. You can't fool people. They're going to sense how we feel towards them, and they're going to put up a wall of resistance. You start to say to yourself, but I try to be nice to them. I try to listen to them. I try to do all these things. But people sense that you're not really extending yourself to them as people. You're just trying to project a false image, a pretentious image of yourself. And then you start thinking, well, why do people treat me this way? Why don't they listen to me? Why don't they pay attention to me? Why do they seem to want to get out of the room as fast as possible? So they're jerks. Everybody else is a jerk. The whole world is a jerk. The world is made of jerks. I'm the only one who's not a jerk. Well, my prayer for you is that somewhere, somehow, down the road, it occurs to you that you're contributing to the problem, or you're actually the one who causes the problem in the first place. Now, as we said before, The greatest problem is that we don't know we have a problem. The problem is not knowing that we have a problem. So what do we do with that? We have to ask ourselves. We have to live the life of self-examination, like Socrates recommends. Am I seeing this situation correctly? Am I in some way responsible for this? Is it possible that I'm the cause of this problem, that I'm contributing to it more than I'm willing to admit? Read the Mahabharata, the long dialogues between Duryodhana and his father Dhritarashtra, Duryodhana and Vidura, Duryodhana and Bhisma, Duryodhana and Dronacharya. All these well-meaning people tried to talk sense into Duryodhana. And you just read all the responses of Duryodhana, one after another, after another, after another. He is clearly, it's obvious as the nose on our faces that Duryodhana is the cause of the problem. And yet Duryodhana never even comes close to acknowledging that. It's always the Pandavas. Pandavas are blameless. Pandavas are righteousness. Even in their thoughts, the Pandavas never committed any sin. The whole problem lies with Duryodhana, but he doesn't acknowledge it. So now, 20 minutes into this class, if I ask you, do you think you're more like Duryodhana or more like Yudhishthira, you will not right away say Yudhishthira. You're hopefully, if you've been listening to what I've been saying, you will have a little pause, a little hitch, and you'll acknowledge that I'm at least as much like Duryodhana, as much like Yudhishthira, because I recognize all of these attributes, all of these phenomena, the tendency to rationalize our mistakes, deception, which causes us to avoid the problem and assign responsibility to others rather than face the problem. We have to come to the point of recognizing that once we face the problem and accept responsibility for our behavior and accept the fact that our negative behavior towards others emanates out and makes our own environment toxic, until we face that and accept that and are willing to do the work to change ourselves, then nothing's going to change individually or collectively. But if we accept it, if we stop to lie to ourselves and we're not afraid of the truth and we're not afraid to look at ourselves in the mirror, then real change is actually possible. That's why the guru is called heavy. That's the meaning of the word guru. Every morning in every Hare Krishna temple throughout the world, we start the day, samsara dava nalalita loka Trinaya karuna ganakanatvam praptashyakalyana gunarnavasya Bande garosi charanara vindam. I offer my obeisances unto the lotus feet of the Guru. The Guru knows falsity from reality. He knows transparency from pretension. He knows authenticity from duplicity. He knows truth from lies. He knows the difference between reality and deception. So you cannot associate with a spiritual master, either personally, if you're so fortunate as to associate with a spiritual master personally, or through his literatures or through his or her talks. You cannot spend time with a bona fide realized soul without turning your life around and coming to the point of prioritizing. Yes, I've got to be a truth speaker. I cannot anymore fall prey to self-deception. In the presence of a guru, it's like being in the presence of a light, a shining light. In the presence of the light, darkness cannot exist. So in the presence of the guru, these things should reduce to nil. These are the symptoms of self-deception. And you can test, am I reducing my tendencies in this area in the presence of the guru? If these things are not reducing, if they're increasing, then you're not taking advantage of the presence of the guru, his books, his teachings, the other other disciples with whom you can get strength. So these are the symptoms of someone in illusion. someone out of touch with reality, whose life is toxic and who's spreading that toxicity to others. The first is justifying. Person in delusion, justify. I had to do that because if she or he hadn't done that, I wouldn't have done this. Can I tell you, there isn't generally a reason to do the right thing. You don't necessarily have to have a say, I told the truth because of this. I gave the exact change because of this. I I I I gave back the $20 bill to the cashier who'd overpaid me because of this. Nobody ever said that in the aftermath of a righteous action, as a result of acting according to the prompt of the supersoul within the heart. We don't need a reason to do something good. It's self-evident, and in many cases, it's spontaneous. When we start to come up with reasons, when we start to come up with justifications, that's a flag that we've done something wrong. In the example of the husband who didn't get up to take care of the baby crying in the middle of the night, it's not incorrect for him to say that he worked hard, but he did not need to remind himself of how hard he worked in order to justify not getting up to take care of the baby. He only reminded himself of how hard he worked when he was trying to excuse his not getting up to help the baby. If he got up to help the baby, he wouldn't have had any excuse in his mind or on his lips. That's the first symptom. Second symptom of self-deception is trying to change others. This includes believing if so-and-so would change, if my wife were not so lazy, if she would just get up when the baby cries and change it right away, then I could get a good night's sleep. I would be able, fresh and bushy-tailed for the office. I would be pleasant and respectful to her. But because she didn't get up to take care of the baby, now I'm going to be grouchy. I'm going to be negative. And not only am I going to allow my morning to be spoiled, but I'm inevitably going to spoil her morning too. That's called trying to change others and thinking that your problems are due to others and don't stem from yourself. And then, of course, blaming, seeing the other person as the problem. Everyone does have problems. That's, it's facile to say that others don't have problems, but it doesn't necessarily, you don't necessarily have the right to appropriate others' problems as a justification for yourself. Well, I did this because they did that. No, you need to say, I did this and I need to take responsibility for this. I needn't have done this as a reaction to that. I'm responsible for my own actions. I may have been tempted. It may have been suggested to me by someone else to wander into a gray area and do something appropriate, but I did not have to entertain that suggestion. I did not have to open up the door and let it in. Another characteristic of someone who's self-deceiving is horribilizing. We make the other person out to be worse than they actually are and you to be better. And we take flights of imagination to think of them doing horrible, unthinkable works in imaginary circumstances. They're not just ordinary people with the normal flaws, but they're elevated to super demoniac status, meant to ruin our lives and destroy the world. And in all of this, when one's life is falling to pieces and relationships are deteriorating, there's obviously a feeling of great hopelessness, feel of powerlessness, a, a, a mood of going around constantly being angry, feeling like a victim, focusing on how badly we've been mistreated, how unfair the situation is, dripping with pity, wallowing in the mud of self-pity. Then also, in order to prove that the other person is larger than life, out to get us, we keep internal lists of all the wrongs that that person has done, practically, realistically, or in the figment of our imagination. And we pull these up like a Rolodex fire in our memory and keep going over and over their real or imagined transgressions. And we see the same pattern of behavior in everybody else. We see that what we imagine, what we've decided is wrong with this person, we see that same fault and that shortcoming with others as well. If you think that your boss is unfair, you think that your boss is partial, you think your boss is biased against you, think your boss sucks at communication, and you thought your last boss was that way, and you thought the boss before that was that way, then you might want to look at your own communication patterns, because maybe it wasn't the boss who was bad at communication. Maybe it was yourself who is good with communication. So anyway, having gone through all these negative uh, effects of a self-deluding lifestyle, we can now see from Socrates' point of view, from the point of view of the guru, that life, especially human form of life, is not just reactive. We should not be affected by other people and other circumstances. We need to take control of our own thought processes, decide which thoughts we're going to let in and which thoughts we're going to slam the door on, and live a life of wisdom. Start cultivating wisdom. Become, each and every one of us, a philosopher, a lover of wisdom. That is the most desirable life of all. Bhagavad Gita, over and over and over again, it says that wisdom is the highest goal which the living being can achieve. We're not going to have wisdom if we refuse to question ourselves and the world. We're not going to have wisdom if we don't learn to distinguish between good actions and bad actions. Without wisdom, without philosophy, great saints and sages would argue that we're no better off than the animals. The only way to make our own life richer, more worth living, more wholesome, meaningful, and purposeful is to pursue a life of wisdom and self-knowledge. This is a principle that great saints and sages have held to so fast that we see they're willing to give up their lives rather than to abandon the pursuit of wisdom, rather than abandon the discipline and the austerity of the examined life. They would rather give up their lives. They would consider themselves better off dead than to live the life of an animal. That fact is central to understanding the guru and the sadhu. Nearly all great saintly persons viewed philosophy not just as a hobby, not just as an intellectual pastime or a purely theoretical enterprise, but they regarded the examined life, the life in pursuit of truth and integrity, as the basis, the very basis on which we should live our lives. This is the basis of their self-esteem. This is the reason they tend to make enemies, because the whole world is enamored, is pursuing a false, doctored, pretentious version of themselves. And so when someone presses for the truth, this rubs a lot of people the wrong way. And we all know what happened to Socrates. We all know what happened to Lord Jesus Christ. We all know what happened to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We know the attempts that the Kazi made to shut down the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But nevertheless, none of this deters seekers of the truth. They're willing to spend the currency of their lives in the pursuit of truth. And should the issue be challenged, should they be forced to make a choice between life without integrity and death, they'll choose death and embrace the transition from this life to another, knowing that they keep the flame of their character intact. I mentioned yesterday or Monday, I forget when it was, that when Socrates was spending the last few minutes of his life in closed chambers with some of his associates, including Plato. They were all morose. They were all down and depressed, thinking of Socrates' imminent death. They were trying to talk him out of it. They were trying to convince him to recant. Um, but Socrates not only would not recant, he was committed irreversibly to integrity, to true speaking. And if it was the issue was going to be forced, he was going to drink the poison. And I forget what what how the discussion went, but someone said they shouldn't be they shouldn't be have the power to kill you. They shouldn't have the power to kill you. And Socrates said, they can't kill me because they can't catch me. It was kind of a humorous, flippant utterance, but a lot of understanding behind it. Here's a man who understands the soul. You cannot catch the soul. The inner soul continues when the outer body ends, like flame from wood, sparks ascending, transcending dark matter, blending with the sky. You cannot kill, nor can you die. You cannot burn, nor can you fry. The soul cannot be scorched by any blaze. No water can drown the spirit. No wind can make it fade. You cannot cut another, nor can you bleed. The soul is eternal, unborn, a seed, indivisible, indestructible, forever free from birth, death, old age, and disease. Yet howsoever turned or tossed, the soul can never itself exhaust. Seed in the heart, beating its drum, powering everyone bright in the sun. The soul's superior force lives on and runs its endless course in God's unlimited universe. So Socrates said they can't kill me because the soul cannot be scorched by any blaze, drowned by water. No wind can make it fade. So let's wind it up here. We started off by asking the question that if the average person were to be asked, are you more like Duryodhana or you're more like Yudhishthira? Most people are so far away from any self-knowledge that they would say, no, I'm not at all like Duryodhana, I'm like Yudhishthira. And why is it, if this is the case, why is it that after chanting, after following the instructions of the spiritual master, after submerging oneself in the philosophical truths of the Srimad Bhagavatam and associating with the great purified souls like Prahlad Maharaj, Prithu Maharaj, Dhruva Maharaj, and others, Jatayu, Sita Ram, one gravitates from one side to another. The more one is advanced in spiritual life and the more that one's impurities come to light, come out into the bright light of day, the more one comes to think, I'm actually more like Duryodhana than I am like Yudhishthira. And this is a good sign. This is a good sign. You're beginning to assess where you are and where you have to go. You're on the path. You're on the road back to home, back to God. In fact, those who say they're more like Duryodhana than they are like Yudhishthira are actually becoming more like Yudhishthira every day. And those who think they're like Yudhishthira and not like Duryodhana are becoming more like Duryodhana every day. So let's make a commitment on this Wednesday morning, Wisdom Wednesday, to make wisdom the torchlight which guides us and which we follow unerringly, without faintness of heart, with boldness and consistency. Seek to bring to light the impurities that reside deep within our heart. The beautiful thing is that bad things thrive in the dark. As long as they're in the dark, funguses and mushrooms and rodents, spiders and all will thrive. You bring all that into the stark light of day and they immediately disappear. They immediately disappear. So our job is to bring the impurities, not to cover them with more muck and more soot and more grime in the basement, not to bury them, but to unearth them, identify them, and bring them up into the light of day, at which point they disappear. They lose their strength to control us, to delude us, to mislead us. So we do that. We reach into each dark nook and cranny of the heart every day with the sunlight of Krishna's holy name. This is our process. This is our means. And it brings us to the end result of realizing that we have a long way to go. We have a lot of impurities, but God loves those who live a life of self-assessment and self-examination. He loves those who take the trouble to get rid of their lust, anger, and greed and move towards the kinds of men and women that he created them to be. And he will help you. He will move heaven and earth to get you to where you need to be. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So some comments here. Namarita says, Hare Krishna from Jiva Noah, who from the San Bernardino area. Satindra Sharma, thank you for joining us. Haven't seen you here before. Welcome to our little forum. Britta says, Krishna is not a bully. Yes, he whispers from within the heart. Up in Ogden area, enjoying the beautiful sham-colored clouds this morning. Utah has an abundance of sham-colored clouds which hover over the Wasatch Mountains. The unexamined life is not worth living. Again, another comment by Britta. People always say, never forget the holy caste. What they really should ask themselves is, how am I susceptible to being seduced by isms like the Nazis were? Every single Nazi thought they were doing the right thing. Yes, just consider whether these symptoms are present as we listed them: justification, victimization, horribilization, trying to change others and mold them over in your image, blaming, feeling hopeless, compiling evidence on the other person, seeing the same pattern of problems repeat themselves amongst all the various relationships in your life. These are the symptoms of a person in delusion. Bharat Patel from Calgary, I saw that you had a wonderful Rath Yatra, I think, last weekend. Looked very well attended, very ecstatic. Good job. Koki, Haribo, Koki and KK Soda from Chino Hills in Los Angeles. Thanks for jumping on board. Hari Krishna to Vaishnavi Devi Dasi. Priya Krishna's become a regular from the East Coast there. I'm going out to suburbs of New York this weekend to Parsippany for the Rath Yatra there. Britta says, make wisdom the torchlight. A life without integrity is death. Now here we have a challenge from someone who hasn't been on our forum yet. Chris Degati says, where is it in the Vedas? Does it say once who says he is like or aspires to be a good is a bad thing? We aspire to be Yudhisthira, but it's not as easy as claiming that you're like Yudhisthira or imagining that you're Yudhisthira or deluding that you're Yudhisthira. Yudhisthira got to the point where he was cursed to go into the forest for 13 years, being cheated of his kingdom by a crooked game of dice, during the course of which his wife was insulted, and he did not react. He didn't call an unfair situation. He did not have a pity party. He did not blame others. He did not justify his own poor choice to gamble. So, my dear friend, Chris, when you're at that level of Yudhisthira, then of course you are in fact like Yudhisthira. But if you would not have acted in the same noble way that Yudhisthira did to all those provocations, then it would behoove you to recognize that you're actually more like Duryodhana than you are like Yudhisthira at the present moment. We aspire to become Yudhisthira, but part of aspiring correctly to be like Yudhisthira is to commit yourself to doing the work, to committing the time and energy and finding a spiritual master who can, in fact, take away those impurities and guide you. He's listening to me. He says, no challenge, just asking G with humility. All right, sorry. You see how far I have to go also. How easily you provoke me. Imagine what I would have done if someone cheated me out of a kingdom and insulted my wife. So I'm declaring to you at the end of this session that I'm a lot more like Duryodhana. I aspire to be Yudhisthira, but there's work to be done. God bless me that I'm willing to face all that and roll up my sleeves and get on with it. So thanks very much. Each and every one of you made this a unique, thought-provoking session. This is the end of our three-part series this week, starting with Motivational Monday, Transcendental Tuesday, and Wisdom Wednesday. Not sure I'll be back with you on Monday because I'm traveling back from New Jersey, but keep posted when you see this kinds of things popping up on our Facebook. You'll know that we're back in the flow. We definitely won't have this class Monday. Most likely Tuesday we'll resume. In the meantime, chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.